seems to be some semblance of calm, this is the best opportunity to now engage those communities to deal with the stereotypes, and also for them to be able to remove the criminals among the communities. Please, in case this committee passes you, approves you, ensure that you have a budget that will help you to engage the communities so that we can deal this issue once and for all. For Shakahola and Kware and all the other issues, we want to see action and not just talk.
Yes. Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for the supplementary one. In conclusion, CS nominee, your appointing authority has considered to the country that one of the failings that the President considered to was lack of communication. You have told us here of very good measures that you have taken in the State Department for immigration, especially in the processing of passports and all that. However, that information is never in the purview of the public, members of the public. And indeed, I have an incident, CS, where a Kenyan in the US called me very desperate that they could not get their passport despite having paid somebody about 20,000 shillings. For a passport was, I think the normal charges are about 4,000 or 3,000 something. And when I followed up the case, the person who was even paid this bribe was not an officer at the Immigration Department, and it took the intervention of the Director General of Immigration, Ms. Evelyn, to get the DCI to hunt for that person. Somebody extorting Kenyans money from Eastlands, pretending to be working in Nyayo House. And therefore, the lack of communication aspect in your ministry is what I want you to address. Should you, or if you are approved, what are you going to do to ensure that there is proper communication to the public, so that the public are not taken advantage of by criminals out there in Eastlands and elsewhere who are extorting bribes from Kenyans on the pretext that they are working in Nyayo House? And just like Owen Bayer said, you once declared Nyayo House a crime scene. That crime scene now seems to have moved from Nyayo House to the periphery of Nyayo House and other areas. I would want to hear what specific measures you intend to take to make sure there is proper communication. Kenyans know how much they ought to pay and to who, and so that they're not taken advantage of, because you are also aware that has been very rampant.
Chairman, thank you. Chairman, I just wanted to ask the CS, this issue of the IDs. Professor, you say the IDs will expire after 10 years. Have you put into consideration the vast areas, people like in North Turkana, how far they travel to get IDs? Because IDs are not like passport, they're essential documents that people must have all the time. After, you know, it will be cumbersome for them to go to those centers to go and get IDs. And secondly, on this unrest, you have seen that, as you have said, the IG resigned. But are you aware, in your absence while you are away, we used to have Baba while you are away, but while you are away, that a new IG was appointed?
He's still away, he can't answer that.
No, but that, what is your take? That we were told away. 60 years, Mr. Speaker, I'm putting it in a better way.
Yes.
We were told when somebody reaches 60 years, he should leave the public service. Are you aware that a new IG has been nominated who's 64 years or 63 years, who has retired, who is being recycled? I don't know what extra thing is going to bring. And my last question is on illicit brews. The Interior Ministry has been accused by the Deputy President of sabotaging the war in illicit brews. Is the war on illicit brews only being waged in Mount Kenya? What aspects of this war are being undertaken in the Interior Ministry, and what is being done by the Office of the Deputy President? How much funds have been used in this war in the last 2 years when you were the Interior Ministry, before you were fired?
Nominee, on the issue of the IG, I direct you not to answer the question, because I've received communication from the President nominating the nominee, who will be vetted by a committee of Parliament, and those questions can be raised there. If you answer that here, you'll be prejudicing what is coming to Parliament. Answer the other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Nasula was a comment. We've taken it on board. Honorable Kimani Ichungwa's issue was about communication. When I assumed office in October 2022, I began a habit of every 3-4 months updating the country on the status of our homeland security. We've not had one in a while. I had planned one for June, which was postponed and thereafter disrupted. We will use our public accountability updates on security matters to communicate more on what we are doing. And the next, if I am approved by this House, the next public accountability address will feature more on the reforms we have made at Immigration Department, because I think there we've made a lot of success. People concentrate on the banditry thing, but I think also on the passport issue we made a lot of success. Where we still have problems is the IDs and other aspects of citizenship documents. With regard to the ID, the question by the Honorable Junnet Mohammed, the reason for the 10-year limit, there are two reasons. It's actually one reason. It's because of changes in technology. Unlike the ID we have, which has no security features, and therefore it can be timeless. But we'll find a way of making it convenient to the people of Kenya to renew after the 10 years, so that you don't create a crisis by people, and we can do that by even having a phased out renewal process to ensure that again we don't inconvenience masses of people. So the problem is technology and the security features in the 3rd generation ID, which is going to be physical, that is the Maisha card. It is going to be also digital, the digital ID. You can have it digitally. So all those are options for the 3rd generation ID, quite sophisticated in tandem with the current trends in security on identity documents. With regard to the issue raised on brews, I would be hesitant to respond to the comment associated with the Deputy President for obvious reasons. But I think, to the best of my knowledge, the Minister of Interior was not cited as frustrating the war. If there are specific officers in the ministry, I think that is something that needs to be looked into to make sure that all of us are reading from the same script. The government policy is to make sure that illicit brews, toxic substances and drugs are not provided to our kids, not just in central Kenya, but everywhere in the country. With regard to how much money the Deputy President office has used, again, I am not privy, and I think that is the office that can answer that question. How much funds have we used in the fight against brew? We have not allocated any special budget in the Ministry of Interior in the fight against illicit alcoholic drinks and drugs. We have used our normal budgets, our normal security operations budget, to carry out that program as part of the normal programs. I submit.
Professor, I'll ask you one or two questions. The first one is a furtherance on the issue of IDs. As you introduce a 10-year ID, just take into account that an ID in this country is everything. You can't enter a supermarket, you can't open a bank account. The old and PWDs cannot access social safety net funds without an ID. Now, if you are going to have that ID last for 10 years, then you must put in place a seamless renewal process so that people don't suffer because of failure to renew an ID card. And if you are approved to go back to office, I would want to see that you draft regulations that will guide and manage renewal of IDs and bring to Parliament for approval. The second issue I want to ask you, nobody asked you, prisons fall under your authority if you are approved. What are you doing, or what do you propose to do about prison reforms? I remember when we were senators and we went with you to Kitui, and we found prisoners literally half naked, poorly dressed, and looking like they were very poor hygienic conditions in which they were operating. What are you going to do, if approved, in prison reforms to make prisons more humane? And also, what are you going to do to reverse the continuing stealing and grabbing of public land occupied by prisons in the country, which is going on all over? Thirdly, the new constitution allows Kenyans who had left the country, taken greener pastures, and acquired citizenships of other countries to reacquire Kenyan citizenship on application. That's what the constitution says. But we get a lot of communication and phone calls from Kenyans out there who are struggling to reclaim their citizenship because they have either British or American or whatever citizenship. What are you doing to simplify? Because the constitution says you reclaim your citizenship on application. What are you going to do to simplify the process of reclaiming citizenship by Kenyans who lost their citizenship? If you can answer those, then I'll come to other simpler questions to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, on the first issue of IDs, I agree with your recommendation and guidance that we should consider seamless transition from after the 10 years to avoid creating a crisis. I believe it will be possible because we had a similar situation with passports when we went into e-passports. So what you do, for example, is to say that the ID that has expired will continue operating until you get a new one, for example, because you cannot be faulted because of a government administrative measure. Number two, we will make sure that we anticipate and put in place a rapid response initiative where you deploy additional facilities, additional service points, additional personnel, even if it's on a temporary basis, at a time when many of these IDs will be expiring. But by and large, the old ID, the expired ID should work until when the state gives you a new one, because it's simply for technology purposes, safety features. It is not that we will give again another ID. It might even be the same, depending on whether or not we will consider that ID as being secure, a secure document by that time. With regard to regulations as guided, we will prioritize that, Mr. Speaker. With regard to